These days, it's like every James Gunn project becomes a winner. Guardians 2, Peacemaker, Suicide Squad, the Guardians Holiday Special, you get my point. But do you want to check out some of his worst projects? Well, look no further than The Belko Experiment. When I heard that Gunn was writing the screenplay of a psychological horror movie, I was confident that it'd be great. 80s people locked up in a corporate office and an overbearing voice telling them to kill each other? Sign me up. Except, I've kinda already seen a similar premise in Escape Room, Cube, Exam, and more. It's a tired cliche at this point.
This is the right thing. This is the only choice we have.
None of the characters stuck out to me either. They didn't have the quirky natures that we're used to seeing in Gunn's movies. It's like he thought, they're gonna die anyway, why give them offbeat personalities? And they don't even die in creative ways. I thought it'd be like Squid Game, but the players create traps for the other players. So that was disappointing. But still, you could argue that it's not really a James Gunn film because he didn't direct it. And I'd agree with you, except he did produce it. He wrote the screenplay. In short, he had full creative control over the project. So yeah, it seems like The Belko Experiment is an outlier in his streak of hits, but if you look at his entire filmography, it's a different story. Let's go back to 1997, when he was the associate director and co-writer of a unique take on Romeo and Juliet called Tromeo and Juliet. I mean, that's an appropriate title for a 90s cult hit, I guess? And the fun fact, the reason why it's called Tromeo is because it was produced by a studio called Troma Studios.
We made it with a lot of heart and a lot of love, and I learned everything I needed to know about filmmaking from making this film.
The stars aligned perfectly there, I'll give them that. Anyway, the entire movie is wild. It's a loose adaptation of the Shakespearean classic, featuring Troma's trademark blend of excessive violence and oh, and Gunn and the director Lloyd Kaufman changed the original ending of the story. I won't spoil it for you if you haven't watched it, but you should. I highly recommend it if you want to be scared for life. Anyway, Tromeo relies mostly on crass poop jokes and gross-out comedy, which you might dig if you love Adam Sandler and Will Ferrell, but I think the real test of comedy is when there's no poop in the script.
Romeo, I thought you never woke before noon.
It's morning to you, Father, but a late night to me.
The soundtrack's pretty good, though. It's an awesome mix of Motorhead, Superchunk, and Sublime. So points for that, I guess. Overall, I'd give Tromeo a 4.
Tell me you don't hate me because I killed Ty.
No, it's my fault.
But you know what gets us? The specials. For a movie released 23 years ago, it was way ahead of its time. You know how The Boys parodies modern DC and Marvel superheroes and portrays them as violent, narcissistic maniacs? Well, The Specials takes Marvel's X-Men and plays them in a similar, albeit less R-rated way. Made on a shoestring budget, it's about a superhero team that's ranked 7th across the world. It's incredibly light on the action, owing to a smaller budget, so it covers up the mostly well-written dialogue and hilarious bad cheap CG, but I guess that's what makes it a worthwhile watch. Not to mention the hilarious performances by Thomas Haden Church, Judy Greer, Rob Lowe, and James Gunn himself. Gunn plays Minute Man and throws a tantrum whenever somebody gets his name wrong. Anyway, The Specials ranks high on my list of favorite James Gunn movies. In a way, it predicted he'd be working with Marvel and DC in the future, and trust me, if it came out today, it'd be considered one of the best Marvel parodies ever. Actually, if we're talking parodies, then I can't not mention Super. It's not a family-friendly movie at all. It features Gunn's signature humor, Rainn Wilson as Crimson Bolt, and a lot of blood. And for those of you who love Elliot Page, he played an unhinged comic store clerk named Libby, who's just as violent as she is. Well, depraved.
Well, we can fight some other crime. You can show me how to do it. You can give me the 1, 2.
Oh, and there's also Nathan Fillion as a Christian TV show hero called The Holy Avenger, and he's one of my favorite absurd characters ever. All in all, if you want to watch Peacemaker's ancestor, then Super is for you. But if you're into the gory comedy horror type that makes you stomach churn, then you gotta check out Gunn's directorial debut, Slither. Released back in 2006, Slither's about killer alien slugs. Yep, that's about it. And what more would you want? Nathan Fillion and Michael Rooker? You got 'em. This movie set the stage for Gunn's lifelong relationships with both actors, and it proved that the director knew his stuff. After writing plenty of good and bad screenplays, he created something uniquely his own. It's stuffed with every horror trope you can imagine, including obvious influences like Nightmare on Elm Street.
He's teaching environmental studies. He's gonna borrow one of my lesson plans.
Oh, I know what he wants to borrow, and I ain't lending him.
The humor works most of the time, and the gore is plenty and disturbing. So yeah, I give it a solid 8. But now, let's look at the creme de la creme of Gunn's filmography. As of right now, there are 4 movies that I rank the highest. The 4th being Dawn of the Dead. Our boy Zack Snyder may have directed the film, but Gunn penned the screenplay. And the way it contrasts so sharply with Scooby-Doo Monsters Unleashed is mind-blowing. Both films released the same year, and only Dawn of the Dead managed to make it to my all-time favorites list. Now, you know how much hate Velma's getting? Snyder and Gunn got about the same amount when fans of the original Dawn of the Dead heard the news. The word on the street was, how dare 2 nobodies touch Romero's classic? Fans of the OG series were savage, but then they saw Snyder and Gunn's visions for the movie and did a full 180, immediately falling in love with it the same way everyone fell in love with the Suicide Squad.
You were gonna save me?
Really good plan, too.
Well, I can go back inside and you can still do it.
Just like Dawn of the Dead, nobody thought James Gunn could remake the Suicide Squad and make it better.
Goody. Something tells me a whole lot of people are about to die.
The 2016 original was, well, a dumpster fire, and to give it a soft reboot while carrying forward some of the characters was a tall order, but Gunn came through for DC and successfully created one of the best DC movies I've seen in a long time. The cast's on-screen chemistry, the visuals, the dark comedy, all of it blended perfectly together. It's literally a masterclass in turning a dumpster fire into a pot of gold. It also became the reason why we have a Peacemaker spinoff on HBO Max, which, by the way, has the best intro of literally any show ever. And on that note, I want to talk about my 2 absolute favorite James Gunn movies. You've probably guessed that it's Guardians of the Galaxy Volumes 1 and 2, and you're right. Now, I understand why many fans didn't like Volume 2 as much as the first one. Many subplots were setups for Volume 3, like the one where Yondu meets Starhawk and Contraxia, or the Sovereign bit being an obvious setup to introduce Adam Warlock in Volume 3. But the movie made up for it by giving fans more of the same. Classic rock, gorgeous visuals, and of course, Kurt Russell as Ego. Having him as the living embodiment of narcissism was perfect casting in my opinion. Plus, who could ever forget Yondu proclaiming himself as Mary Poppins after saving Star-Lord? So yeah, I'm claiming Volume 2 as one of my favorites, but not more than Volume 1. There weren't any teases in that movie to set up a sequel. It was an all-in type situation, since Gunn was making a movie about a ragtag team of misfits who nobody knew at the time, and he made bold choice after bold choice, making Drax's personality entirely different from his comics counterpart, and even adding Howard the Duck, who people deemed a mistake from 1986. But he successfully created one of the most visually and sonically distinct Marvel movies of all time. There was nothing like, and there's been nothing like it, except maybe Volume 3 when it hits the theaters. And that's all, folks. I'll see you in the next one.